Hey YouTube, welcome back. Today I'm going to be building the dreaded wire flower rack from Emily's Flower Shop. I've seen this posted on lots of different Facebook pages, people building it and just having the most difficult time with it. I'm kind of looking forward to building it because I do sort of enjoy building things out of wire. That being said though, it does look tricky. So I'm not sure how it's going to go. Let's get into it. Looking at the instructions, there's not a lot of components. There's just some cardboard which needs to be cut out for the shelves, some champagne wire. There's also some yellow heat shrink tubing. Let's get into it. First thing is to cut out the bits of paper. This will be the shelves. The easiest way to do this is with a craft knife, not scissors. So if you don't have a craft knife, I'd recommend definitely getting one. It is an essential tool when building miniatures. With cutting out paper, I like to cut sort of towards myself in vertical lines, and then I'll rotate the paper. I like to cut all of the vertical lines towards me in one go, and then I rotate it and then cut the lines vertically again. I find that's just easier than trying to like manipulate the knife around and do all that sort of stuff. Next is the heat shrink wrap tubing. I'm going to leave the wire to the last. This one just needs me to cut out 12 pieces of the tubing at 3mm each. Pretty simple, just holding them up to my ruler and just measuring and cutting. Again, this is pretty easy to do with the craft knife, just cutting it that way instead of trying to use scissors. So this shrink tubing is what is going to be used to connect all the pieces together, which I'm kind of excited to try out because I've never tried joining wire with shrink tubing before. I've just tried glue, which, you know, has varied results. So that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to trying that out. And now for the wire. So the first thing we need to do is cut out the wire for the arches. So that's two pieces that's 24 or 2 centimeters or 240mm long. I usually tend, when I have to cut out wire that's like the same length, I usually tend to just cut out one piece and then I kind of use that one piece to guide the rest of my other pieces. So the next instruction tells you to bend the frame, and it tells you to have it so there's a certain width between the frame from either side, but it doesn't tell you what height that is. So now you can work it out by looking at the other instructions, which is what I decided to do. I think at least it is the width between the shelves and hopefully the top shelf. So it does show you what the width is between the shelves. So from the bottom of the rack to the first shelf is 30mm, and then to the next two shelves is 25mm. So I decided instead first to mark out those distances on my wire, and I used masking tape to just mark them. I thought that would be kind of the easiest. The good thing about masking tape is it comes off really easily, but it also, the bad thing about masking tape is it comes off really easily. So with marking these bits, the masking tape did move a little bit sometimes, which was annoying. So I think next time I probably would just use more stickier tape and just smaller pieces so that I could just hide it and not have to take it off. So I marked out where the shelves were going to be with my masking tape, and then I, from there, measured the 32mm to try and get my arch shape. I tried something different as well. So I marked out on the mat the 32mm and also drew a center line just to try and get the arch as centered as possible. It's really hard bending wire to make an arch shape, especially when the wire is really bendy to start with. Just trying to get that all even. I just tried to see if this would work if I just drew a little grid to like guide myself to on my mat to see if that helped. And it did, but you'll see as we progress that it kind of was really for nothing, but it did help. So now I've got my arch shape. I need to make the second arch. So I decided to just trace my second wire over the top of my first wire to get it as even as possible, which sort of was effective. Okay, now I've got my arch shapes. The next step is to make the metal connectors. This goes in between the shelves and it will also connect the arches together. So for this step, you need 6 pieces of wire that's 40 millimeters and 6 pieces of wire that's 30 millimeters. And once these are all cut out, I just sort of double check that they were all the right length, because they all need to be the same. If they're all different, then you're going to end up with a shelf that's going to be uneven. So once these are all cut out, you need to bend the ends at the 5 millimeter mark. So I decided to just mark out 5 millimeters in tape on my board again, instead of measuring the wire up to my ruler, because I find it always, when I'm trying to measure wire against my ruler, all I end up doing is just knocking my ruler. So it was easy for me to just measure out the 5 millimeters on my board and bend the wire off of that. And I found that if you place your pliers about 1 millimeter away from the actual measured line, when you do bend it, you get the exact, almost the exact like measurement that you want. And again, with these, it probably doesn't matter if it's not exactly 5 millimeters, as long as they're all the same. So now I've got all my connectors bent, I'm ready to assemble. I started off with the first shelf, put my shrink wrap tubing over my tape marker, and then inserted the one of the longer wires and then one of the shorter wires. The longer wires go from one side of the arch to the other, and the shorter wires connect the frame from the first arch to the second arch. What I found with the heat shrink wrap tubing is a bit hit and miss. So on some of the joinings, the heat shrink wrap tubing didn't shrink as well as I would have liked, and so the wire kept popping out, which I ended up fixing just by gluing some of those loose connections at the end. And then I also found that you really have to make sure you're holding the wire in place as you're shrinking it, because if you're not, the tubing will shrink and push the wire back out, which is really annoying, because then your shelf is now uneven. So yeah, the heat shrink wrap tubing I think is a great idea for connecting wire, much less messy than glue, but you do need to be like really precise. Like, it can go wrong very quickly, and I have to say it didn't turn out as nicely as I'd hoped it would. It doesn't look awful in saying that. And you'll see I tried to be as gentle as possible doing this, but I still managed to bend my arch and frame somehow, even though I was trying not to, and I did kind of misshapen my arches whilst doing this. Then spent a really long time trying to neaten it up, which had varied results, and gluing the cardboard bits on was when things all sort of went horribly wrong. The shelving wasn't the same size as the wire rack, so even though I double and triple checked my measurements on my wire, is including the bends, the width of my shelf did not turn out to be the same as the shelves. And so I guess in hindsight, what probably would have been a good thing to do would be to, once you've bent these wire bits, line them up with the cardboard to see if they are straight. Even though I bent them at the 5 millimeter, it was clearly not the correct measurements, because ideally you don't want to have this gap. And then the same with the width, there's quite a big gap on either side there. My recommendation when you're bending the wire to connect the frame together, use the cardboard as a reference for the length of your wire and where the bends go. And so that way when you go to glue these, it's going to be exactly perfectly neat and flush, because now you can see I have got a bit of extra hangover. Well, I don't know if I would call this a mistake, because I did follow the instructions and did what they said and believed that I had all the measurements pretty good. Now, I'm not saying the instructions are wrong, but I mean, I think I've just found a better way to go about doing it. Okay, now I've got my shelves on. I decided to do something at the end, which was put some heat shrink wrap tubing on the base of my frame, just so it kind of, I guess would resemble little like rubber stoppers that you would have on a shelf or something. But I thought that it would make it easier for me to stick to the miniature house once it was all completed. And hopefully this works, because Usually when I try to customize things, it always goes horribly wrong. I don't know why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it in place with my tweezers because otherwise it's just going to go everywhere. So my thought process here is, okay, I just lit it on fire, so would recommend that you don't light it on fire. When I've used heat shrink wrap tubing any other time, it's been in the context of sealing off wires. So I'm actually surprised that this catches fire because I would have thought that it's not supposed to catch fire, theoretically. And now my little rubber stopper at the bottom of my wire rack is burnt to a singe, so I was just holding it too close to the flame. That looks much nicer. The flame is quite hot. I often forget that you don't really need to hold it that close to the flame, that the heat coming off of it is pretty decent. This is really turning into a what not to do video. At least all I could say is, you know that I'm authentic and that I'm human and that I'm not just crazy good at everything. A lot of the time-lapse videos you see is just, oh, look how I perfectly made this thing and it turned out really, really well. Okay, so I think I'm pretty done. I'm happy with this. I've got my rubber stoppers, which honestly, yellow is a bit of a choice, but it is what we have to work with. I did also notice, and I don't know how this happened, but my arches, one's a little bit longer than the other. Don't know how that happened. I'm gonna run with it because I'm just gonna say it's an aesthetic, unique touch to my wiring rack. Often you'll see, shelving in racks where the back arch is slightly taller. It's just a design feature. So my wire rack has a design feature where the back is a little bit higher. And so I'm gonna make sure that that part of the rack is at the back wall. So it just looks, no one's gonna know but me and everybody watching this video. I have to say I'm not a fan of this cardboard, but we'll just work with what we've got. So there you have it. There is the dreaded wire rack from Emily's Flower Shop. Overall, I think this took me probably 3 hours to make. I think it turned out okay. It's not the neatest one I've seen. I've seen a few really nice and straight wire ones. And I think if you wanted to make it look pristine and perfectly straight, you'd probably have to buy a different kind of wire to what the kit provides. The wire in this kit is so flexible and malleable. It's just really soft. And basically, I think anything you do, it's just gonna bend. So if you want it nice and straight, maybe get a different kind of wire and it will probably work much nicer. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a thumbs up. And if you want to see more mini videos from me, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time.